Hi everybody, thank you for watching. So today's video is finally going to be my review on the new Urban Decay Naked Heat palette. I've had my palette for just over a week now. I've been playing with it, creating different looks with it, just seeing what I think about the shadows and trying to put a full review video together. So I think I have some good feedback now that I can give on the palette. I will show a little tutorial of how I created this eye look with this palette. I'll also insert a few other photos from throughout the week of the different looks that I've created with this palette. I have some swatches to show, and then I also have some comparison swatches that I wanted to show as well. I pulled out a bunch of my palettes and tried to find comparables to the shades in here, and then I will give my final thoughts on what I think of the palette, who I think it's good for, and if I think it is worth it. But if you would like to see my review swatches tutorial on the new Urban Decay Naked Heat palette, let's go ahead and get started. So the Urban Decay Naked Heat palette has packaging that makes it a little bit difficult for me to show you, but it's very similar to the other Naked palettes from Urban Decay. The only other Urban Decay Naked palette that I own is the Naked Smoky. Packaging layout and all of that is comparable to the other Naked palettes. So inside you do have a large mirror. It does come with a double-ended brush, which I will touch on shortly. And then you have your 12 different shades in a mixture of matte and shimmers. Obviously this is the Naked Heat palette, so it is a very monochromatic palette with a lot of reds, and mostly reds and some browns. You know, very much the palette does have a theme, the Naked Heat palette. The palette is $54. Like I said, it comes with 12 shades. It does come with a double-ended brush and a mirror. I picked mine up at Sephora. Right now it is available at the Urban Decay website, Sephora, and Ulta at the time that I'm filming. I will have any links to it for sale down in my description box. So when I first saw this palette, I was immediately really drawn to it because I do love warm shadows. I loved the reds in here, the browns, the shimmer shades were calling out to me. It was just a palette that definitely stuck out to me. I did feature it in a Will I Buy It. I'll have that Will I Buy It listed down below. And the only thing that I was really struggling with was the price tag, the $54. I thought that was pretty expensive, and because I'm not like a Urban Decay fanatic, I'm not like a Naked palette collector, I just wasn't sure $54 was going to be a smart purchase for me. The hype started building more, Finally it was to the point where I was like, okay, I think I just need to get it. I also did get a ton of comments from people requesting that I do a review video, and that really meant a lot to me, that people watch my reviews and, you know, take what I say and listen and decide if they're going to make a purchase off of them. That really does mean a lot to me. When it did come to Sephora, not only was Sephora having double points for their points program, but also I got 8% cash back at Ebates, which I thought was a pretty good deal because with Ebates it does kind of knock the price down a little bit. You end up getting cash back later. So I thought, you know what, I'm going to go ahead and do it. I'm going to go ahead and give it a try. When I first got it, again, the packaging I really like. It's very sturdy. When I open it up, I do enjoy the mirror. I will say for the brush, it comes with this double-ended brush. So on the one side, we have a little bit more of a dense brush. I don't know if this is supposed to be like a blending brush or more of like a pencil brush. It's kind of like an in-between. And on the other side, we have more of like a fluffy, flat shader brush. And honestly, I do not like the brush at all. I tried it again today, and I just feel like you can tell that my shadows are not as blended as they could be if I was using like an actual blending brush. And I felt like I had to go in over and over and over with the flat shader side to really build up the color on my lids. I have tried with every eye look that I've done. I've tried to use this brush and make it work, and at first I thought I just needed to kind of like beat up on the brush, you know, like kind of beat it up, show it to his boss. Maybe I would like be able to like loosen it or something, but no, the brush was like a big no-go for me. So then we have our shades in here, so I'm just going to jump right into what I think of the shades. I have some photos that I can insert. The finger swatch is on top, and then the brush swatch is on the bottom. I can also pull out a couple here and show you on camera what I think of them, and then I do have some comparison swatches that I will be showing coming up here. But so starting from this side, we have Ounce. When I first looked at it, I thought it was a matte shade, but it definitely does have a little bit of shimmer to it. It's not white, it's more of like a creamy peachy white almost. Basically the only thing that I use that for is to either set my primer, because it is such a subtle shimmer. It's not like I'm just putting shimmer all over my eyes. And then I will do it for the brow bone and inner corner, which is what I have today. And then we have Chaser, which is just such a light brown. Like, it just, this shade is not wearable for me. The next two in the palette, we have Sauced and Low Blow. Both the pretty typical transition brown crease shades. I do like both of these shades, but again, there's not that they're super similar to each other, but we have Sauced and then Low Blow. Low Blow just has a little bit more of an oomph to it. It's a little bit of a deeper brown, a bit of a warmer brown. I also appreciate getting the basic matte brown transition shades because sometimes with palettes we don't have that, and I really needed to complete an eye look. I know a lot of other people do. And then going into Lumber, this was a really interesting shade to me. Here it is swatched on my hand. Again, there will be swatch photos inserted here also, but this was one, when I swatched it on my finger, it was very, very dry and I was kind of concerned, but it ended up being one of my more favorite shades in the palette because it is a really pretty kind of like pinky peach, almost like a duochrome shift to it. It's really, really beautiful. And I will say I didn't love the way it swatched. I didn't love the way it felt swatched on my hand, but on the eyes, I thought it worked out very well. What I will say for every single shimmer shade in this palette is that you have to use some sort of setting spray with it, a Fix Plus, just some sort of liquid. Otherwise, the shimmers barely show up, and Lumber was no exception. It just doesn't have enough oomph on its own without some sort of liquid, and that was for every shimmer shade in here, which I was pretty disappointed at. I thought at least some of the shades would be able to show up on the eyes good enough. Like, they swatch fine, but on the eyes, they need help. Sea Devil is a really pretty like reddish brown. I really do like that shade as well. And then moving into Dirty Talk and Scorched, here they are swatched out on my hand. I mean, from the swatches, you can tell that they are a little bit different, a little bit more orange, a little bit more red, but they are very, very similar. And even on the eyes, they are super, super similar. So those two were actually a little bit disappointing to me. And again, you do need some sort of setting spray to get it to really show up. And moving on to a few of the mattes that we have in here, we have Cayenne, which is a really nice deep brown shade. I do really like that one a lot. And then we have El Fuego, which is a nice like reddish brown shade. It is what I have all over my eyes. And then Ashes, which is kind of a deep purple here. And then Ember, which is was a really interesting shade to me. I really think out of the palette, this was like my favorite one. Here it is right here. I did wear this the other day. This is what I'm wearing in my 20K giveaway, if you haven't checked it out. My 20K giveaway is live and I'm wearing Ember all over my lids. I also am giving away the Naked Heat palette in that video, so that of course will be linked down below. But I really did like that shade a lot, and I found it to be one of the more like unique shades out of the palette. So overall, with a few of swatches on my hands and then the swatches that I inserted in here, kind of my overall thoughts on the shades and how they performed on the eyes. Again, not swatched, because I feel like you cannot judge a palette based on swatches. That's why when I'm reviewing palettes, like what I did with the Jaclyn Hill palette, I took a while, I created different eye looks, I tried to use every shade out of the palette so I can explain in my review how they perform on the eyes, because that's all that matters. Actually putting these on my eyes, I have to say I was disappointed. Honestly, I really was. It was not quite what I was expecting. I was pretty taken off guard that I had to use some sort of liquid with every single shimmer shade. I just didn't see that coming. I mean, there's definitely shimmer shades where you use a liquid to make them more metallic or give them more of an oomph, but that you don't have to in order for them to show up. And just, I really struggled with the shimmers, which was really disappointing to me. One thing, as I was going through and creating different looks with this palette, I felt like I was creating the same look over and over. That's why when I went in with today's look, honestly, when I sat down to film my look, I had no inspiration. Like, I had nothing. Nothing was like screaming my name. I just wasn't inspired to pick up the palette. And I feel really bad saying that, but it is the truth. I've heard people say that they feel like the shades just kind of blend together. And I agree with that. Especially when you have shades like Dirty Talk and Scorched that look different in the pan, they look different swatch, but when you actually put them on their eyes, they're basically the same thing. To say, just with all of the looks that I've come up with this week, I've just been pretty underwhelmed. And on top of that, I was using the brush that came with this palette, which I don't think is a good brush at all. When I was doing other looks where I was actually going to be going out and about, I had to bring in other brushes to help blend the shadows, and even still, I don't really feel like they blended all that miraculously. Like, I feel like I have better shadows. So those are the swatches and my feedback on the shades. I'm bummed. I'm really bummed to say that. I'm bummed to say that the palette hasn't been working out for me the best because I was really excited for it. Also, as I was going through it, all I could keep thinking when I looked at the palette and was actually putting the shadows on my eyes was, I have to have a dupe for that. I have to have a dupe for that. And I know a lot of people said in my Will I Buy It video, you know, the people that were saying don't get the Naked Heat, they were saying you have so many comparable shadows. And so in my mind I kept saying, oh, I think this is comparable, I think this is comparable. But I was like, you know what, I actually want to go ahead and see. So I want to show some comparable dupes for the shades that are in here before I go into my final thoughts. So I want to show you guys what I have in my collection, and you know, maybe if you have some of these similar palettes or you have all of the palettes that I have, you know, maybe you can save your money on the $54 and use what you have in your collection already. But why don't we go ahead and jump into some comparables, and I'll show you some swatches. I'm gonna do comparables of every single shade. Again, like the first 4 shades, the first 2 don't really do anything for me. The next 2 are your brown transitions. I'm just gonna pull out the shades that were a little bit more unique to me, or when I used them I thought right away like, oh wait, I have a dupe for this. One shade that I thought of right away was this Lumber, because it has like the pinky peach type of feel to it. So what I thought would be similar to it was from the new BH Cosmetics and Carli Bybel, the Deluxe Edition palette. When I used that shade, I immediately thought of this last shade here in the palette. Okay, so this is Lumber from the Urban Decay palette, and this is from the Carli Bybel and BH Cosmetics palette. You can see that they are super, super similar. They feel very similar in texture as well, but I will say with the Carli one, you don't have to use a liquid on it. It shows up really nice by itself. I need it with the Urban Decay, so the Carli one is actually a little bit better. And this entire palette for all of the eyeshadows and highlights in here is $22.50. So one palette that I kept coming back to when I was thinking about dupes was the new Jaclyn Hill and Morphe brushes, the palette that Jaclyn Hill did with them. As I was going through this palette, I kept thinking, oh, I can find shades in the Jaclyn palette. And I didn't want to do all shades out of the Jaclyn palette because I know that it sold out very quickly. Not everyone got it. So I did pull out some other palettes as well. But there's some shades in here that I just thought were extremely, extremely similar. So next I wanted to show He Devil, which is this really nice warm brown red. From the Jaclyn palette, I'm going to compare it to Jax, which is right here. Okay, so here are the 2. The first one is the Urban Decay, and the next one is the Jaclyn and Morphe. Again, extremely, extremely similar shades. Roxanne from the Morphe palette was immediately one of my first favorites. So the first time I used He Devil, my mind went to this Morphe palette because these shades are extremely similar. I picked up Dirty Talk from the Urban Decay palette, and it immediately reminded me, again from the Jaclyn Morphe palette, it reminded me of Firework. So here are those 2 swatched together. On the top is Urban Decay, and on the bottom is Jaclyn Hill. And from Urban Decay going into El Fuego, and then once again coming back to the Jaclyn Hill palette and picking up the shade Jax, which is right here. So here we have the Urban Decay and then the Jaclyn Hill. Again, just super, super similar. I know these palettes released around the same time, so if you were able to get the Jaclyn Hill palette, you might not need the Urban Decay. Another palette that I was able to find a dupe in is the Anastasia Modern Renaissance. So He Devil, which is right in the center, and comparing that to Red Ochre in the Anastasia palette. I have Urban Decay on the top and then Anastasia on the bottom. Again, very, very similar shades, and I know a lot of people own the Modern Renaissance because it's been a super hyped up palette, so you might be able to find some dupes in here as well. And then I thought there was some comparable dupes in the Violet Voss Holy Grail palette. I was trying to see if I could find a dupe for Ember, which Ember was a little bit hard to find a dupe for, and again, I do really like that shade out of the palette, but I thought it was a bit close to Bat My Eyes from the Violet Voss palette. So there are those 2 swatched out next to each other. You can see the one from the Urban Decay is a bit of a deeper brown, but they are pretty similar in shade. But again, Ember was one I couldn't find an exact dupe for, so if anybody has one, you can let me know, but I thought that Violet Voss one was pretty similar to it. So those were a few comparable shades to eyeshadow palettes that I have in my collection. I definitely will say it did remind me a lot of the Jaclyn Hill palette, and you know, if you saw my Will I Buy It video, I was kind of weighing back and forth. if I should get both palettes because I did think that they were similar. I'll just run through my tutorial really quickly because I didn't use a ton of shades in this particular tutorial. What I did first is I came in with Low Blow and I put this into my crease, and then I put El Fuego all over my lid shade. I just kind of wanted to do something a bit darker, not a super smoky eye, but just a bit darker and to mix it up. And again, I really haven't been loving on the shimmers, so I wanted to do more of a matte look. And then that is all I did, and just blended the two together as best I could using the brush that came with this palette. And then on my lower lash line, I put a little bit of Low Blow and Cayenne together. I didn't want to bring the reddish tones onto my lower lash line as well, so that is why I stuck with just the browns for the lower lash line, and then I just have on some pure lashes in the style of Flirt. And that's all I did for my eye look today. But I'll have the little clip inserted here of me actually applying the shades so you can see how they apply on my eyes. I will also have an Instagram tutorial going up. It'll probably go up tonight on my Instagram, so if you want to check it out over there, I'm March Beauty Word, and I will show another look using the Urban Decay Naked Heat palette so you can see how they actually do apply to my eyes. But after sharing the swatches, some comparables, and then my tutorial, why don't we go ahead and wrap this up with my final thoughts. Okay, so my final thoughts on the Urban Decay Naked Heat palette was that it did underwhelm me, to be honest. I guess I was maybe just expecting a little bit more. I definitely was caught off guard having to use liquid for the shimmer shades. The mattes didn't blend out as well as I thought maybe they would. And just for $54, like, I have better eyeshadow palettes in my collection than this one. I do want to say that, with that said, I don't feel like this is a terrible palette. I don't mean to come off as bashing it. I didn't feel like the formula and the pigmentation of these shadows were as good as I thought it was going to be. But if you don't have a lot of shades like this in your collection, or you don't have a lot of palettes like this in your collection, but this is what you really love, I think it's a decent eyeshadow palette, but I still wouldn't pay $54 for it, to be honest. Either use, like, if you get a 20% coupon at Ulta that applies to the prestige brands, use it on this, or, you know, maybe wait for the VIB sale, but I don't feel like it's worth $54 in my honest opinion. The shades inside were just either not pigmented enough, you had to use liquid, or they were too similar to one another in the palette. Not even similar to other eyeshadow palettes, but they were too similar to one another in the palette. And when you only have 12 shades to work with, that was a little bit disappointing. Unfortunately, this is more of a negative review, and I'm super bummed about it. I gave this palette my all. I tried probably 5 or 6 different looks in the past week with this, and I was really trying. I really wanted to make it work, but unfortunately at this time, I think I'm actually going to be returning my palette just because of how many palettes I have in my eyeshadow collection. I just don't feel like I really need this one. You guys know that I've been trying to save up for a Natasha Denona palette, and this is what, like, almost half the price of one of her palettes that I've been wanting. So, you know, why would I hold on to $54 when I could put it back into something else that I would like to try? So let me know in the comments down below though what you thought of it. Do you guys have it? Do you absolutely love it? I know I've been talking to a lot of you on Snapchat, and you've been showing me the looks that you're making, and a lot of you seem to really enjoy it, which is fantastic. Like, that's great. Let us know some of your favorite shades down below. Let us know how you use them. I would love to know your comments too, because again, I don't think this palette is not for anybody, but I also don't think the palette is for everybody. You know, if that makes sense. But again, this is just my opinion and my review, but I appreciate that people care about my feedback and care about what I think about the palette. So I really wanted to go as in-depth as I could, and especially to show some of those comparable swatches to kind of show why, you know, maybe it doesn't make the most sense for me to keep around in my collection. But again, let us know in the comments what worked for you about this palette, what didn't work for you, if anything didn't work out for you, or if you're still considering picking up the palette. Again, I'll have it linked down below if anyone is still interested in getting it, but I'd love to know your guys' feedback so much because I'm very curious to hear your thoughts on the palette. If you guys did enjoy it or find it helpful, please make sure to give me a thumbs up because that really does help me out. I hope that you will also consider subscribing before you go, and I'll catch you guys real soon in my next one. Bye!